Zach Hyman's return to the lineup couldn't have come at a better time for the Oilers. With 4 games in just 6 days, it's time to get to work.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. This is my 3rd season as a host here on the Locked On Podcast Network, my 10th season doing digital hockey content. And I want to thank everyone that is making Locked On Podcasts the #1 sports podcast network, and everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we've got your team covered every single day. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com, and you could win up to $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So on today's show, we are going to walk through the win Saturday afternoon against the Carolina Hurricanes from a few different perspectives. We will open up the show singing the praises of Zach Hyman, why I thought he was so impactful, why his return is so meaningful. Our second segment, we will pivot to talking about the Oilers at large through the conceit of, even if it's not going right, they do need to start making some headway as a team. They do need to start making some progress. And then in our final segment, we'll talk about some of the applicable solutions the Oilers can pivot to as soon as possible. So to start out, anytime a player is coming off of a long layoff, especially an injury-related one, I am always inclined to give that player a little bit of extra time. Someone should have told Zach Hyman that, because I was more than willing to give him a week or two to get up to speed. And instead, on Saturday night, he recorded 11 hits in his return to the lineup. He played 23 minutes, only 2 shots on goal. I expect that number to creep up as the season goes along and he gets a bit more of a feel. But to jump in the lineup after not having played hockey since May, 23 minutes, which is a ton for a forward. There are teams who have defensemen who don't play 23 minutes per night. So for Hyman to jump in right away, play a heavy workload, and then go out there and play with the same level of intensity and reckless abandon you've come to expect from him, that says a lot. And I saw a lot of people talking about it during the game on Twitter, the idea that for so much of this season, we talked about it a little bit last week, my everydayers have heard me say this before, effort and intensity, those are not as subject to the ebbs and flows of a long season. There are just going to be nights where the puck doesn't want to go in. You can have the perfect process. You can set up great passes and you're hitting posts. You're hitting crossbars. The other team's goalie makes a great save. And those are just the breaks within a long season. But when it comes to visible measures of intensities, things like hitting on the forecheck, cycling and winning puck battles, those little things that don't show up in the score sheet. And yes, hits do, but winning your puck battles, forcing turnovers, all of those little sequences, all those little plays, and the components of Hyman's game that don't show up in the score sheet are so sorely needed for this group that has lacked intensity, that has lacked juice for long stretches. The Oilers, and let me preface this, let me jump in here and say this. Intensity doesn't mean fighting. Someone doesn't have to do what Trent Frederick did last week and fight a guy on the other team just to get the guys going. That's the most straightforward, direct, actionable way that you as a player on a struggling team can try and inspire, fire the guys up. And players are never not going to be fired up when one of their guys goes. And you hear the appreciation. And look, I don't want to relitigate this because I talk about this every time we talk about fighting, but I'm not particularly convinced fighting matters a whole lot in the literal sense, but the guys on the team tell you it does. So I am going to at least passively shrug and accept that premise. And Hyman returning to the lineup is what practical application of grit and intensity look like, because Zach Hyman is a high-end hockey player. You bundle his willingness to throw his body around, to use his foot speed, to become a forechecking presence, that opens things up, and it allows you to distribute your talent more evenly throughout the lineup. But we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But something I was workshopping as an idea, and I'll be curious to see what you guys think, whether you're watching over on YouTube or listening to the audio version. a lot of Zach Hyman's value, and don't get me wrong, he is a very talented hockey player. He is the third best forward on this team. I would dare say the fourth best player on this entire team. Some of what makes Zach Hyman so invaluable is the fact that some of his presence and his on-ice impact is tied to non-chance generation or chance denial play. These types of players, these high-end, gritty, grinder types, you think about a Tom Wilson, you think about what Brad Marchand used to be 4 or 5 years ago when he was a bit healthier, a little bit younger. That type of presence, and those are very different archetypes. You know, Marchand's 5'8", 5'9", Tom Wilson is 6'3". But there is something to be said for the value of having a presence and energy about you. And what that does for the rest of the guys on your team. And I'm not here to say Zach Hyman returning to the lineup is the reason they beat the Hurricanes on Saturday. Once again, the other team, the Hurricanes, they had a majority of the possession. They had a majority of the scoring chances. Now, the Oilers kept it close on the high danger chances. And we know Carolina is a volume offense team. So if they're content to take their high volume offense, if you're the Oilers, you can be a bit selective, you can be choosy, and the Oilers did win the expected goals battle at 5-on-5. So you marry those two premises together, and really quickly, you start to get a feel for this group. And you running McDavid, Hyman, Savoy, love it. That's what I wanted last week when Hyman went on LTIR. Not LTIR, excuse me, when Hyman was going on IR, and that Hyman would be returning shortly. So Hyman going into Nuge's spot, Savoy staying in the top six. Roslovic stays with Draisaitl. It's been a great marriage ever since they got thrown together in the middle of October. I would like to see them stay there. Podkolzin as well. The third line, I am not as in love with where they're at in the bottom six, but I think once Nuge comes back, this group will have a bit to play with here. And yes, Ike Howard goes down to the AHL where there's just more to be done, frankly. And I'll talk about this later in the week when we have a little bit more time to dedicate to talking specifically about Howard and Stetcher as well, who got claimed off of waivers by the Leafs. But if you're only playing 9-10 minutes a night, and you're playing with Adam Henrique, you're playing with Trent Frederick, Noah Philp, there's not a whole lot to be gained there for a player like Howard, who is a high-end traits guy. Those traits need to be refined, developed, and he needs to figure out what he can and can't do at the NHL level. But he's not going to get a lot in that process by playing only 9 or 10 minutes a night, so I have no real qualms about that. I wish you could have found a way to keep Stetcher just for depth, but he hasn't played particularly well, so you suck it up. You miss the guy, but it'll be okay. I think the Oilers really like what they've gotten out of Alec Regula this year, so I'm not too worried about having to lose Stetcher there. But getting Hyman back, especially now, where we're about a quarter of a way through the season, and this group is still finding its way, trying to get its feet under it. And Zach Hyman and Matthias Ekholm's respective arrivals a couple seasons ago are the two biggest moves that elevated the Oilers from a nice regular season team into a bona fide Stanley Cup contender. Zach Hyman is an integral component to this team's potential, and I think if the Oilers are going to get where they would like to go this year towards the end of the season, unlocking that next gear for Connor McDavid's counting stat production is going to be absolutely essential. His goals per 60 at 5-on-5 are the lowest they've been in quite a while. Granted, the whole team's goals per 60 are the lowest they've been in a really long time, but getting Zach Hyman back in the fold can start to address whether or not these are systemic style issues that can be addressed with tweaks, or if there are real talent issues here and guys are changing where their value is, and maybe the Oilers need to consider they can't just rely on Connor and Leon to win them games. Speaking of Connor and Leon winning them games, we're going to talk about the conceit, the idea, fake it till you make it. I'm going to tell you why Saturday night against the Hurricanes was a great example right after this. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena to root on your favorite team. That's one of my favorite feelings in the entire world. Walking up the tunnel, up the couple steps, you're met with the thumping music, the painfully bright neon scoreboard, the smell of popcorn, the smell of beer, the smell of hot dogs. That sensory overload is my happy place. And the best way to get to games is through Game Time, the app that gives fans the advantage. It is your ultimate hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. I went to the Ranger game against the Predators last Monday. My friend picked up the tickets through Game Time. I have successfully converted pretty much all of my friends into full-time Game Time users. And the best part of that Game Time ticket feature is the panoramic seat view. You look at the ticket listing, they show you an exact view from your seat so you know what you're walking into on game day. No surprises. And in some markets, you can find NHL tickets for less than $25. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Thank you for making Locked On Oilers your first listen of the day, and thank you for helping make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. So, my friends, it was great to see the Oilers win. I'm just going to come out and say it. When we talk about things you will feel good about coming out of a win, finding a way when you don't play at your best is integral. And we'll talk about that binary in a second when we move along in our second segment, but when Connor, Leon, and Bush are going, and 15 seconds into an overtime of 3-on-3, I would define as going. It is like watching music be played. It is so easy, so beautiful, and this is the idea for 3-on-3 overtime hockey. When the NHL ballparked this idea, at this point, I think it's 9-10 years ago at this point, this is what you are visioning. The best players on both teams pushing to create the most dangerous offenses possible to end the game as quickly as possible. And 15 seconds in, as beautiful as it gets, Draisaitl sets the record for most Oilers game-winning goals. As good as it gets, man, that is what it is all about at this level. And you saw Connor say it after the game in the locker room, that that's what they're paid for. They're paid to make the difference in these close games, to win these games. And along those lines, we have spent quite a bit of the first 7 weeks of the NHL season here debating where the Oilers are going trajectory-wise, and if what happens this early is going to impact it being the team down the road, whether that's ceiling or floor. Are the Oilers doing what they need to do now to start making inroads, to start making progress? Because your season is not just about the wins and losses. It is so much more than just the record next to your team's logo on the graphics at the start of the broadcast. Your goal as a team is to find out the exact optimized configuration of your guys, finding out the exact roles that are going to produce the best results for your players. We talk about it all the time. I'm sure my everydayers at this point are sick of me talking about it. You got to put guys in a position to succeed. It's why I'm not that hung up about Howard getting sent to the AHL. There was not a top 6 role for him in this group at present. Now, we get 3 months down the road and he's playing well in the AHL and the Oilers have an injury and they give him a spot call up. Then we can have a conversation about what's his path to getting into the top 6. But with Roslovic coming into the mix kind of out of nowhere, a little bit unexpected in terms of the Oilers' big picture plan. They certainly weren't planning on signing Jack Roslovic, say, July 1st, but he's come in and he's played very well. His traits have translated quite well to playing with Draisaitl. So Howard needs to play more. And like we said in that first segment, bottom 6 minutes are not going to help him, especially him as a shoot-first winger who's going to need to figure out what he can and can't get away with at this level. But that brings us to one of my great questions. And for me, I personally feel this is hockey's chicken or the egg. I'm sure you're all familiar with the hypothetical. What came first, the chicken or the egg? I am not here to entertain that conversation. I do not know. Evolution would probably tell me the chicken, and then something resembling what we would identify as a contemporary chicken laid an egg, because that modern evolutionary chicken comes from something else, but that's neither here nor there. The question for me when we're evaluating these great teams, or these teams that are expecting to be great, do good teams find ways to win when they don't play well? Or are they bad teams or mediocre teams or only slightly good teams that are getting lucky? And there's no way to really know until you get to the playoffs, which is what makes it a fun thought exercise and a reasonable question. Because right now, by all metrics, the Oilers are a mediocre hockey team. And yet they are in the last wild card in the West. We all expect them to click into gear here, get something going in short order relatively soon. And we don't have any evidence so far this year that this group is on the cusp of a major breakthrough. And I was reading NHL Sid on Twitter, who writes for one of the Oiler blogs, wrote something along the lines of, each of the last 2 years, being 2024, 2025, and 23-24, the Oilers have gotten off to really bad starts. They got their coach fired in 2023, and last year they came out of the gate very slow as well. Some of that is the baggage of a shortened off season, a lot of miles on the odometer over the last couple seasons. But each of the last 2 years, the Oilers' underlying numbers were indicative of a team that was going to start producing offense. The expected goals were good. The high danger chances were good. And this year, the Oilers are not producing great underlying numbers. They are creating high danger chances at one of the lowest rates of any team in the NHL. They are creating expected goals at one of the lowest rates in the entire NHL. So that tells you not only is the result not great in terms of winning consistently, the process to get you there is also not something that you're going to be able to do long term and still find ways to win. Of course, the counterpoint to that, Zach Hyman, one of the Oilers' best players, most important players, has missed the first 6 weeks of the season, and that's a valid excuse. The Oilers' defense has taken a while to get going, and frankly, still beyond maybe Evan Bouchard over the last 2 weeks has not been particularly good or exciting. But that's the beauty of the long season. The Oilers do have a high floor, and we're going to talk about that in our final segment as far as applicable solutions to some of the Oilers' problems. The Oilers are in a lot of these games, and when you are consistently hanging around in close games against good and bad teams, that is an addendum. You don't need to just hang around against the bad teams. You should pull away and beat them. The Oilers are close. And when you are in all these close games, sometimes that coin flip is going to smile upon you and you're going to win in overtime. Sometimes it's going to frown upon you and you're going to lose in the last minute of regulation, because that's the way the cookie crumbles. Hockey is extremely random. Hockey is at times extremely unfair. And this Oilers team has not demonstrated the capacity to create its own luck by any discernible way. I talk about that a lot. Hockey fans are very uncomfortable with the role luck plays in both regular season and postseason results. It takes some of the romance, some of the beauty out of what we like about hockey. The idea that, well, you could play as good as you can, and that's still not good enough. The sports are supposed to be the ultimate meritocracy. The idea that no matter what, if you try your best, you work hard, in the long run, it's going to pay off for you. And instead, we consistently see teams get upset in the postseason and in the regular season. That's why every game matters. There are no easy victories in the NHL. But this group is not making progress. It's not making a headway. They're not getting more game control. They're not creating more dangerous offense. They are in close games, and they are waiting for someone to make a play. For now, as a holding pattern to keep a high floor, this works. But in the long term, this is not going to cut it. And coming up next, I'm going to tell you the exact areas the Oilers need to improve on if they want to see improvement in their results and ultimately become a better hockey team. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game, or if you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to big fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for your shot at a bigger payout. The Thunder, still your betting favorite to take home the title at plus 180. The Nuggets, plus 650. Cavs, 700. My Knicks, plus 1,300. The Rockets, plus 1,400. And the Lakers, LeBron coming back this week at 15-1. FanDuel keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head on over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you so much to everyone who is hanging out on this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers as we get into the first real stretch of the grind. The first 6 weeks or so of the NHL season are for getting your feet under you, for learning to crawl and then standing up on your own 2 feet. This pocket of games here is going to go extremely fast. We are a week and a half away from American Thanksgiving. American Thanksgiving, 75% of the teams in playoff spots on that day ultimately make the postseason. You think about that. You think about the fact that 2 months from now, we'll have the Christmas break. Not even 2 months, 6 weeks from now, you get the Christmas break where you get a couple days of no action. You have January, and then we're going to the Olympics. Between now, today, November 17th, and the Olympics, it is going to be a blur. And I don't say that to scare you. I don't say that to sound like Pink Floyd. I say that because in the process of your season, there are benchmarks and identifiers you're going to need to hit. And the sooner you can start to make incremental progress in getting there, the more feasible it becomes. You think about a semester-long project in college that gets assigned maybe the second or third week. You go through a pitching process, you get it approved, and you have 9 weeks to put together a project. Now, there are people like me, hand up, who can get a project done in 2 weeks if they wait till the end, and they can BS their way through the progress reports and half-ass their way through that stuff because they have executive dysfunction, because they need to feel that clock bearing down on them to force them to get work done. Those are very real types. Professional sports, it's a little bit harder because you're dependent on other people. This isn't a case of one or two people in a group project who need to dial up and focus for a week or two to produce a couple slides and then figure out their talking points. All of these pieces operate in conjunction with each other. That's the other part of this too. It's not just we need to get player X and Y going. It's if we get X and Y going, do we still have Z going? And all these moving parts where it becomes one of those word problems where you got to get a dog, some medication, a baby, and food across a river, but you can't bring the baby and the medicine at the same time, or the dog, and you can't leave the baby on the shore by herself. All of those types of questions are brain challenges. They're brain teasers. They are based in logic. And we generally identify problem solving as a virtuous trait. It is a skill. It is something that makes you a more valuable leader, someone who can be depended on. And right now, Kris Knoblauch has to figure out a better way because the way the Oilers are playing, especially at 5-on-5, is not good enough. They are not producing enough offense overall. They are not producing enough dangerous offense. They are not playing at a fast enough tempo to create offense at the rates we have seen from them historically, and they are struggling to score. That trickles down all the way, and it ties into the overarching theme that the Oilers are leaving meat on the bone, that they are failing to be the team they need to be. And I pulled this stat from, I forget whose column it was, but I want to read it to you guys. I wrote it under the headline Up in the Air. So the Oilers have had 4 games this year where the game-deciding goal, whether they won or lost, in the last 2 minutes. They have had 3 games where that tying or winning goal happens with 5 or more minutes to go, and then 5 games sealed on empty netters, whether that's for or against. So 14 of the 20 games the Oilers played this year have come down to the final 5 minutes. And that is an extremely difficult way to live. That is not a recipe for sustainable success because you are hinging so much on the variance of the game. And the Oilers have 2 of the 5 best players in the world. I refuse to concede that point. They have 1 of the 10 to 15 best defensemen in the world. They have an elite winger in Zach Hyman. There is enough talent here that they should not be holding on by the skin of their teeth in all of these games. That tells me this is a style issue. This is a tempo issue. This is a fit issue. And until Kris Knoblauch can identify meaningful ways to improve, and I have a few written down here. Number 1, transition, like energy, needs to be non-negotiable. We talked about pretty in-depth that first segment what Zach Hyman brings to the table in terms of just being a presence, being annoying, hitting things, forechecking. Transition play is about effort. If you are a forward, do not fly the zone early. Stay in, give your defenseman a target to hit in stride so they can break out and they are not put on islands. The more your defensemen are put on islands where they need to make passes against breakouts and long passes at that, it is going to put them in positions where they are going to turn pucks over. They're going to lose pucks. They are going to put you behind the 8 ball. If you're a defenseman in that case, no freelancing, no adventures. You have that outlet pass, hit them on the tape, get up in the play, and let's go. The controlled, organized regroup is not the sexiest thing in the world. It's not the most exciting. But when the defense is struggling to transition the way it is right now, that is one of your recipes. It can't just be punt, punt, punt. All right, Connor's out there. He can carry the puck through the neutral zone. Or Leon's there. He can carry the puck. The Oilers need to have a functioning hockey team for more than just the Connor and Leon minutes, especially on the nights where the Oilers need to play them together because they're struggling to score. And right now, at large, the Oilers are struggling to score to the degree that Kris Knoblauch is having to play Draisaitl and McDavid together at a rate he didn't last year. The Oilers are well on their way to hitting that benchmark of what Connor and Leon played last year at 5-on-5 together already, and it's only November. And then, on top of that, help your guys out. And that is a team-wide edict. If you are a forward, know the time and know the place. If you want to whip that cross-team pass in to try and score on a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-2, know if your defenders are in a good position. Know who you're passing to. Is the guy I'm about to send this pass to capable of finishing this chance? There are so many little decisions, and it's what I find so incredibly fascinating about hockey because it's so free-flowing, because the structure is so take it by ear strategy-wise, where you as a player have a lot more leeway in your decision-making than a quarterback does in football or a pitcher does in baseball. So much more of hockey is read and react, and that means you have to make decisions. And right now, the Oilers as a team aren't making incredibly great decisions. They are struggling at times to play consistent hockey, and all of this is interconnected. But with the return of Zach Hyman, I am cautiously optimistic that the Oilers are going to start to figure out what they need to do offensively, which should take some heat off of their goaltending and off of their defense. We are going to, and that will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much to everyone who made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day, everyone who helped make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Oilers wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave the show a 5-star review. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.